And I've been aided in that caution ever since I've moved to the Midwest, where another colleague taught me the penguin method. What's the penguin method, Lawrence? Hello and Happy New Year. I'm Lawrence and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond. And one of those memos pertains to winter. By now, we live in precedented times, meaning that for many, the harsh freeze of winter can only add to the gloom. As somebody who grew up in Britain, where winters are mostly bearable, this was never really me until, that is, I moved to America's Midwest, where the weather can get so unbearable even the tardigrades are moving back to Britain. But in all of the years that I've been describing this, there's one thing that I haven't told you. That along the way I've picked up several hacks, that is, clever workarounds, to make Midwestern winters 22% more bearable. 21% more bearable. And I know what you're thinking, those content creators who come up with hacks are themselves hacks. But it's different this time because I'm not entirely convinced by some of these hacks, and you'll see what I'm talking about in just a moment. Oh yes, and just to preempt those of you that live in a cold place that isn't the Midwest, like Alaska or Greenland or an iceberg in the middle of the Atlantic, I'm quite aware that the hacks that you're about to hear are used in other places, but I didn't move to those, I moved to the Midwest. And so without any more faffing about, here are 6 winter hacks that I only picked up after moving to the Midwest. When you first move to another country, your brain is busy trying to take in all of the weird stuff you've never seen before. For me, it was things like injury lawyer billboards, the word aluminium but with one eye, and the Geico gecko. But having moved here in the lead up to winter, there were several things that I saw people doing to their cars. And one of those occurred on a particularly snowy day, when I noticed that the tyres of certain moving vehicles were decked out in chains. And that's when I realised that America takes bling to a whole new level. But this wasn't for decorative purposes. People in the Midwest and other cold places equip their cars with tyre chains to give them extra traction in the snow or ice. Now, before that well-known anti-chain brigade comes at me with all of the laws and legal ramifications, it turns out that while mostly legal, laws around tyre chains do vary by state. So be sure to look those up at your own leisure/leisure. So now that you've pictured that vehicle with more jewellery than Mr. T, picture that same vehicle with what you think are broken windscreen wipers/windshield wipers. This was exactly my thought when I saw a stationary car or two with their wipers sticking up in the air. Well, I quickly learned the reason for this. It turns out people do it in advance of Snowmageddon or a particularly bad frost, in order to prevent the wipers from freezing to the window. And while I have myself made use of this, and while it does make things easier, there is something oddly gratifying about pulling a frozen wiper from the window, so long as you don't snap it. And anyway, it wasn't my car. But while we're on this subject, cleaning off the car is something I've had to do multiple times every year since I moved to the Midwest. And usually a good old scraper does the trick, but there are people out there that like to remind me to get ahead of the game. And apparently that doesn't just entail putting your wipers up the night before. An old work colleague of mine who was really into cars, we'll call him Frank, they're always Frank, absolutely swore by putting Ziploc bags on his wing mirrors. And Frank's reasoning is that this prevents ice from building up on your mirror. And so I tested it, and sure enough, so long as you seal the bag properly, this method does work. The only thing is, it takes about as much effort to do this as it does to scrape off the ice, and it's no way near as pleasing. No offence, Frank, but this just proves that you're bad at prioritising tasks, which is why they made you senior manager. But as it happens, Frank also liked to merge his love of cars with his love of food. Frank was one of those people who was always just sort of there. But having seen much of the world from Plymouth, Indiana to Lebanon, Indiana, Frank was never afraid to impart his sage wisdom. And that's why he advised me during one particularly harsh winter to rub the family car with potatoes. This is not a joke. The theory goes that taking a sliced potato and then rubbing it against your window will disperse the sugar content of your potato across the window and thus create some sort of magical force field against the ice. And it turns out Frank was right. It really does work. And the only 2 reasons that I don't have B-roll of this in action is that A, it's pretty much the same work just to scrape the ice off. And B, it's a waste of a potato, right? Nobody's going to be eating an ice scraper, because my wife's cousin Chad is the exception that proves the rule. Of course, the safest place to be during a freeze-pocalypse is your house. But even then, assuming that there are no problems with your heating or your freezer or your fridge, you could fall foul to a burst pipe. And that's because sometimes your pipes are unable to withstand the pressure of the frigid water inside. And that's why I've learned to practice hack number 5. And hack number 5 is where you intentionally leave your taps running so as to alleviate the problem of a burst pipe. And some of you might be thinking, that's a wild waste of water, but here's the thing. You only turn on the tap a tiny bit so that a small, constant drizzle flows out, enhancing the welfare of your pipes and making it impossible to sleep at night. Because even if you're not affected by the torturous sound of the dripping, you're constantly lying there paranoid that you accidentally left the plug in the sink again. And if that's not enough to keep you awake at night, perhaps the image of me doing the following funny walk is... Ice on the ground can be very dangerous both here in the Midwest and back in Britain. After all, I remember when I was about 14 years old, I saw my physics teacher fall flat on his back, and once everybody around him had moved past the laughter, we soon realised that that probably hurt. And so I've been very cautious ever since. And I've been aided in that caution ever since I've moved to the Midwest, where another colleague taught me the penguin method. What's the penguin method, Lawrence? Well, it's not where you dress up as Danny DeVito, although that low centre of gravity might help. It's where you literally walk like a penguin. It's said, and I've found this to be true, that if you waddle from side to side like this, it positions you in a better way to keep your balance on the ice. That's why you see penguins walking like YouTube sensation Lawrence Brown. It turns out that is my natural waddle. Now, I am not a penguin waddle instructor, nor am I a penguin officially. So don't use this video as a how-to. Instead, I'll link to an article about it in my description below. That way, if you fall, it's on someone else. Happy New Year, everyone. That's it for this episode. Let me know in the comments below if you have any winter hacks. I'm Lawrence Brown. You can follow me on Twitter at LostInThePondUS. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and click the bell so that my videos don't get lost in the pond. Every single one of these videos is made possible by my 300+ patrons. If you would like to become a patron of Lost in the Pond, you can do so today at patreon.com/LostInThePond. Until the next video, do wrap up warm.